Hi everybody, and welcome back here to Bible Side Book Chats. I don't know, I need a better name for this series, but we're going with that for now. Two pieces of housekeeping. One, I'm still trying to figure out a new filming setup in my office. With starting school, everything's been a little hectic. And two, my neighbors are having some construction and they have had some pretty heavy-duty equipment over the last few days. So if you hear large equipment or construction sounds, that's what's going on. I've waited 3 days to, I've waited 3 days to film anything and everything. And I am now currently stuck against a wall. I have to film basically 2 weeks of content on one day. So just keep in mind, if you hear equipment noise, that's why. I will try and do my best of talking around it, but I have no guarantees and I didn't want to get up at 5 a.m. So anyway, let's get into it, and welcome to Bible Side Book Chats. And let's talk today about recovering from biblical manhood by the person on the screen, because my library covered it up and I didn't write it down. So yeah, alright, I read this book and it is very well written. It is also annoying at points. Christian non-fiction books that present ideas, present things, and are not well researched. I can remember one book in particular. I can't remember the title now, but I remember reading this one chapter in this one book. I'll put it somewhere on the screen when I remember, inevitably. And the author was using a Facebook poll as a source and was calling it research and a study. This is the bar that a lot of Christian nonfiction uses. It is barely existent. A lot of them are basing their stuff on other people that don't know what they're talking about. They do not understand how to use secular sources or scientific sources. And it's really becoming a prevalent problem. That doesn't mean that those books are bad inherently. It just means that it's becoming a prevalent problem, especially when they claim that they have the answer. Coming from a more scientific background, I understand how to do those things, and I recognize it's not a skill set that a lot of people are taught. And especially when someone has gone through higher education, it also becomes exceptionally evident. Again, I don't say this to say that Christian nonfiction authors that haven't gone to college are terrible or don't know what they're doing or may not know what they're talking about. I'm not saying that at all. And in certain instances, it doesn't really matter that they aren't sourcing things perfect or understanding things perfect. If it's in the case of like a memoir or a book about a specific issue that they've gone through and they've talked with other people about. The original clip of this is like completely full of construction noise, so I just want to restate what I was saying here so everyone can hear me. Okay. A big problem is that a lot of these Christian nonfiction books want to talk about theology like they fully understand it, when most of these people do not have a working knowledge of actual theological text, nor do they have a knowledge of the academic study of theology, or of especially the Christian Bible, specifically the New Testament and definitely the Old Testament. Because once you start digging into that, which I highly recommend everybody does, you really start to grasp things in such a different way. It's a different way of looking at the text. You study the text, you engage with the text differently, and a lot of these books come from a religious self-help space, which is totally fine, and there's some great stuff in those, and honestly, I normally find something amazing in most of them, but when you actually engage with the text at an academic level, you start to question things and challenge things and deal with your presupposed positions. And when someone has gone through that, like this author has, that wrote Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, or Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I don't remember the title right off my head and I don't have it. it becomes extremely obvious that that person has done this work, that has wrestled with these things, that has talked about these things, that has worked with these things. I'm currently reading a book that I'll be able to recommend for this soon. I've just started it though, so I'm not comfortable recommending it yet. So when I criticize stuff like that, I'm criticizing the fact that these people are, in many cases, in fact, the majority of cases, taking the Bible at face value. And you can't do that. It needs to be studied properly. But we don't have many of those issues with this book. So this book is a response to the very popular in conservative circles Christian nonfiction book called Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. I have not read this book yet. It's on my list of books that I need to read, review, and talk about. I'm working on a bigger video about biblical manhood and womanhood and principles of it and connections for it and a whole spiel that will probably be out sometime in 2024. But books like this help illustrate a lot of the problems with those types of books. So let's talk about what this book does right and what this book does wrong. So this is a woman who grew up in conservative Christianity, who tried to do everything right and took to heart so many of the lessons from purity culture, from books like Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, and other books talking about biblical womanhood. And took them fully to heart and accepted them as being completely truthful. And then reality hit her in the face. And she realized that maybe what she'd been taught wasn't fully accurate. And she started to discover what was going on. Now, in this book, this author heavily relies on the novel, The Yellow Wallpaper. I haven't read it, but it is considered a feminist iconic work from the 1800s. And basically, to sum it up, the book talks about a condition that does not exist anymore that we would consider depression or burnout or something like that, that doctors decided was women needing to stop working because they were being too masculine. Again, 1800s, stupid. This book is about a woman who undergoes this respite treatment and is forced to only do something for an hour a day. Other than that, she's not allowed to do anything. And I mean anything. We're not talking bed rest where you can watch Netflix all day. We're not talking you're allowed to read. You're not allowed to do anything. You're supposed to sit around and do nothing and stare at the wall. And she's held in a room with yellow wallpaper. And she starts to go insane, being stuck in this room with this yellow wallpaper. And she starts to peel it off the walls. Now, the author wrote this book because she was prescribed this treatment by a doctor because what experts think now, she was going through postpartum depression. I also live right across the street from a school. So, sorry if you can hear recess. Like I was saying, this author is talking about feminist thinking and how all of that works. Sorry if I keep glancing over my computer. I just want to make sure it's still recording. And even though she aligns with a lot of feminist thinking, she still believes the myth that has been created in conservative Christianity that, the secular world views men and women as the same because the secular world wants equality between men and women. And I truthfully don't know how those things got crossed and confused. But no, equality means that you are equal. It means that you have the same advantages and disadvantages, maybe not disadvantages, but it means that you have the same advantages as somebody else. And it means that your voice, your name, your thing will be respected based on gender, race, etc. Will not be a part of how that is. That's what it means. That's it. It's actually extremely biblical if you think about it in how it's presented, because it's supposed to be that. But, and here's the kicker, a lot of Christian theology is toxic and misogynistic. And this book talks about a lot of the the misogyny in especially the idea of Christian biblical manhood and womanhood. And she's deconstructing and reconstructing this idea in her own life and using research to prove that and stuff that she's read to prove that. So she read a bunch of books about biblical manhood and womanhood and talked about them. And one of the things she talked about is like the differences between like Bibles for women and Bibles for men and Bibles that are, gender neutral, and how Bibles for men will have all this stuff on pornography and lust and all this whatnot, and then Bibles for women will have things on how to make your husband happy. It can be insulting, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so careful when I'm getting a study Bible. I do have some that are targeted towards women. Actually, I'm still using the one that I got when I was a teenager, which is targeted towards teenage girls, but I specifically chose it because it didn't have any of those things. And yes, I did get the pretty cover because I like sparkly things, but I mean, I'm wearing acrylic nails. Like, I like feminine things. The author of this book doesn't. She wants something plain and simple, and that's totally fine. I think that there needs to be a balance between the different things. For instance, I have another NIV Bible that is gender neutral, that doesn't have anything specifically. And then I have a Christian Standard Version, which I actually forgot at my godmom's, that is feminine in design, but the interior is not gender issues. So I like those aspects of it. Like I said, I like the research. We have properly footnoted. We have properly researched. She clearly actually understands the evidence that is presented to her, which is nice. And again, the analogy of the yellow wallpaper is used throughout. She'll present a teaching from one of these books. A lot of it is focusing on the book Biblical Manhood and Womanhood, which again, I'm sure many of us have experienced the like gender segregated Sunday school class about purity, where girls are told that they have to be responsible for every urge a boy or man has towards them for the rest of their life. Which is just ridiculous because, especially when it comes to grown men, we're talking about teenagers and grown fucking adults, and the grown men need to learn to, be adults. And if they can't keep their hands off of children, maybe don't have them around children. And two, that teenagers are gonna have these emotions. Now, this stuff is starting to change, and I'm thrilled for that. I still disagree with the principle of saving sex for marriage. I don't think that that is actually biblically sound. Again, that's my own personal opinion. I think that it can be. I think that that can be a choice that you make, and that is totally fine. But I think that this onus on women, especially, is a problem. This onus on women being the responsible ones for all of men's desires, being expected to, and this book illustrates it, and even Bethany from Girl Defined is starting to recognize this as well and talk about it, and I'm so thrilled with a lot of the stuff that she's put out over the last couple of years. It is such a huge growth for her. Anyway, this author also talks about how those experiences really, really hurt people. A lot of people are starting to wake up with this. A lot of people are starting to recognize this. The dangers of these sort of one mindset, only this works type scenario. This book, it really, really breaks down the misogyny. It also talks about some of the racism within the church as a whole. Not as much as I would have liked, and especially considering this book was published in 2019, I believe. I can check that really quick. Yes, 2019. Oh, I'm sorry, 2020. So probably written in 2019. I find it slightly alarming that this book doesn't talk about the rise of Christian nationalism, which is a form of fascism, and it is a massive problem. But it might have simply been out of the scope of her research. So, yeah. Ultimately, I really like this. I give it 4 stars. I find it to be very helpful. Like I said, I wish that she talked more about the racism, because white supremacy is integral into biblical manhood and womanhood. Literally integral. From its foundation through to more modern books, such as Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. Again, this book isn't perfect. This book isn't trying to be perfect. And the author admits it. The author admits that she's going to get something wrong. The author admits that not everyone is going to agree with her. The author admits all of this right away. The author talks about this being a learning process and that stuff is going to change. But it's very focused on, like, being close and recognizing that you are equal under God and finding the yellow wallpaper, tearing it down, talking about it, not shoving it under a rug. Like, we have to talk about the yellow wallpaper. So yeah, ultimately, I do recommend it. Expect to see this in, like I said, my big video that I will be doing probably next year about biblical womanhood and the ins and the outs and the positives and the negatives of it and the reasoning behind why my position is what it is on it. Also, there's now a book review posted on all of the book review places, so it'll be up on Goodreads and Storygraph, both of which I have. And I'll probably post it at a couple of other places. But anyway, I'm going to try and edit this dumpster fire of a video due to technical issues, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.